Her stepmother forced her to marry a homeless man to shame her, but a shocking truth emerged. Before we begin the story, please leave a comment letting us know where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The summer heat in Atlanta was brutal, but not nearly as cruel as Martha Greene's heart. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble floor as she stormed into the living room of her luxury home. Her stepdaughter, Kate Monroe, sat quietly on the couch, holding a small bouquet of sunflowers she had just picked for her sick little brother. "You gave food to a beggar again," Martha snapped, eyes like cold steel. Kate looked up, startled. "He looked hungry, Martha. He hadn't eaten in days." Martha scoffed. "And I suppose next time you'll invite him in for dinner too." Behind her, the massive double doors swung open, and Brian, Kate's younger brother, rolled in slowly in his wheelchair. He looked pale, a permanent IV port peeking from under his sleeve. His kidneys were failing. The medical bills were piling up. Martha turned to Brian with a sweet fake smile. "How are you feeling today, sweetheart?" Brian nodded weakly. "Okay, I guess." Kate gently touched his shoulder. "Go rest upstairs, Bree. I'll be right there." As soon as Brian was out of earshot, Martha's smile vanished. "You think kindness is free, Kate?" she whispered sharply. "This house, your brother's treatments. The food on your plate, that all comes from me, not your dead mother." "Me?" Kate swallowed hard. "I'm just trying to help people who have nothing. And now I'll give you someone to help for life." Martha smirked, walking to the bar and pouring herself a glass of wine. Kate frowned. "What are you talking about?" Martha raised her glass slowly. "You want to feed the homeless? Good. You're going to marry one." Kate's eyes widened in disbelief. "What?" "A man named Noah. Lives behind that gas station on Auburn Street. Dirty, smells like garbage, hasn't bathed in weeks. You'll be his bride." Kate stood up. "You can't be serious." "This is insane." Martha stepped forward, now inches from her face. "I am very serious. Unless you want your brother's dialysis to stop tomorrow?" "His treatment ends the second you say no." Kate felt her knees weaken. "You wouldn't." "Oh, I would. One call, and he's off every donor list." Martha sipped her wine calmly. "Make your choice, Kate." Tears welled up in Kate's eyes. "Why would you do this to me?" Martha leaned in closer. "Because you humiliated me in public. You defied me in front of those society women when you gave that beggar your lunch. You made me look like I raised a fool. So now, you'll live like one. That's what happens when you cross me." Later that night, Kate sat at the edge of her bed, gripping the old photo of her and Brian from when he was healthy. She could still remember the laughter, the birthday balloons, the days when their mom was still alive. "I'm sorry, Mom," she whispered. "I don't have a choice." Across town, under a flickering street lamp, Noah sat by a dumpster, his clothes torn and stained. He clutched a half-eaten sandwich someone had thrown at him earlier. Around him, people passed like shadows, eyes looking away. No one saw him. No one cared. But inside, Noah whispered to himself, "Just hold on, Hudson." One more day. One more miracle. He didn't know that miracle was about to walk straight into his life. It all happened too fast. One moment Noah was curled up behind the gas station, hiding from the rain in a pile of cardboard boxes. The next, a black SUV pulled up in front of him. Two men in suits stepped out. "Are you Noah Brooks?" one asked. Noah looked up, alarmed. "Who's asking?" "Come with us. You're about to get everything you ever wanted." They didn't wait for an answer. 15 minutes later, Noah stood in a mansion bathroom that looked like it belonged in a movie. Gold-trimmed mirrors. A marble bathtub. A shower big enough to sleep in. Steam rose as hot water rained from the ceiling like a dream. He stared at his reflection in the mirror. clean-shaven, hair cut. Wearing a crisp black tuxedo, but the eyes staring back were still his. Tired, haunted, unsure. He whispered to himself, "This isn't real." Downstairs, the living room had been turned into a private wedding chapel. Velvet chairs lined up perfectly. A minister stood waiting near the fireplace, and in front of him stood Kate, beautiful, silent, and heartbroken. Martha Green greeted the guests with fake cheer. A few family friends, a photographer. No one knew the groom was homeless just days ago. She made sure of that. Kate stood frozen at the top of the stairs, her wedding dress heavy with sorrow. The pearls on her veil sparkled, but her eyes were dull. Noah looked up as she descended. He was stunned. She looked like an angel, but her face held no joy. They met at the altar. Neither smiled. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, "we are gathered here." The words faded into background noise for Kate. All she could hear was her brother's voice in her head. "Don't cry, Katie. God will surprise us." Maybe this was the surprise. Maybe it was punishment. Then came the vows. "Noah Brooks," the minister said, "do you take Kate Monroe as your wife?" Noah hesitated. Then he glanced at Kate, her lips trembling, her eyes pleading for this not to happen. But behind her, he saw Martha, arms folded, face cold. I do," he said quietly. "Kate Monroe," the minister asked, "do you take Noah Brooks?" "I do," she interrupted, voice barely a whisper. It was over in minutes. The photographer snapped staged photos. Fake smiles. Noah barely understood what was happening. He felt like a prop in someone else's cruel story. Later, in a guest room, he sat on the edge of a king-sized bed. He hadn't touched the food. He hadn't changed out of the tuxedo. He was too overwhelmed. Why me? Why now? He stood, walked to the mirror, and stared again. That face. It was familiar, but not just as his own. There was something else, a feeling he couldn't explain. Something buried. He touched the back of his left ear. There, hidden beneath his clean skin, was a small birthmark, oval-shaped. That's when a name echoed in his mind. Hudson. He blinked. Where did that come from? He gripped the dresser. His hands shook. Who is Hudson? Why does that name feel like home? Suddenly there was a knock at the door. A butler entered. "Sir, Mrs. Green asked that you wear the grey suit tomorrow. She said you're expected at breakfast with the board members." "Board members?" Noah asked, confused. The butler only nodded. "Yes, sir. You're the son-in-law now." As the door closed, Noah stared into the silence. He wasn't just a husband now. He was being pulled into something much bigger, something he didn't understand. And somewhere in the dark, a past he didn't remember was clawing its way back. Kate hadn't slept, not even for a second. The sun was rising slowly over the Monroe estate, casting long orange beams across her bedroom floor. She still wore her silk robe, untouched by makeup or stylists. The wedding had ended only hours ago, but it felt like a century had passed. She sat by the window, staring at the empty swing set in the backyard. Her mind refused to rest. Noah Brooks, the man she had married. He wasn't like the men her stepmother had introduced before. Cocky heirs, greedy lawyers, shallow sons of politicians. Noah was quiet. Too quiet. And behind his silence, there was a weight, a pain that made him flinch at kindness. And yet, there was something else. That birthmark, she thought. She had seen it when he leaned forward to help her into the car after the ceremony. It had triggered something in her memory. A child, a story, a photograph. She rose from her chair and walked across the room to the locked chest at the bottom of her closet. It was an old wooden box her late mother had given her when she was little, filled with keepsakes from a life long buried under Martha's control. Kate opened it and shuffled through the yellowing papers, postcards, and photographs. Then she found it. A small photograph, cracked at the corners. Faded. It showed a boy, maybe 6 years old, smiling beside a beautiful woman standing near a fountain. Kate gasped. The boy had the same birthmark behind his ear. Oval. Pale. And the woman? Her eyes widened. She was wearing a brooch, a golden rose. The same brooch Martha wore to every major event. Her hands trembled. Down the hall, in his guest suite, Noah sat alone, staring at a folded white envelope left on his pillow. There was no sender name, no stamp, just one word written in elegant cursive. Hudson. His heart skipped a beat. He opened it slowly. Inside, a single photograph, old, worn. The same boy from Kate's photo, standing beside the same woman. But in this version, someone had written on the back, Hudson Ezra Monroe, 2 days before the fire. Noah's chest tightened. Hudson, he whispered again. That name, that word, that face, they weren't just someone else's memory. They were his. Suddenly, fragments of a dream rushed back. Flames licking the edge of a house, a woman screaming, a gate that wouldn't open. Hudson, run! The voice. The panic, the smell of smoke. He dropped the photograph. The door burst open. Kate stood there, breathless, holding the same photo in her hand. Their eyes locked. You saw it too, she said softly. Noah nodded. I think that woman is my mother. Kate stepped closer. And if that's true, then Martha took more than just your pride when she forced you into this house. They both stared at each other, the same question unspoken but heavy between them. Who really is Noah Brooks? Kate whispered. Your name. It's not Noah, is it? Noah lowered his eyes. I don't know who I am, but someone wanted me to forget. And Martha Green? She was watching everything. From the upstairs window, sipping her coffee slowly, face tight with worry. She had noticed the way Kate looked at the photo earlier that morning. She had seen Noah's reaction when the envelope arrived. She clenched her jaw. If he remembers who he is, she thought, everything falls apart. She walked to her private study, opened the drawer beneath her desk, and pulled out a locked box. Inside, documents, letters, and a silver USB drive marked with one word, Ezra. She stared at it for a long time, then whispered, I burned your past once, Hudson. Don't make me do it again. The morning of the wedding felt more like a funeral. Harper sat at her vanity, staring blankly at her reflection. Her wedding gown, freshly steamed and trimmed with ivory lace, hung untouched on the closet door. She hadn't even tried it on. Downstairs, the Oberson estate buzzed with activity. White folding chairs were arranged in perfect rows across the backyard garden. A catering crew laid out shrimp cocktail and mini sliders. A soft quartet rehearsed under a silk tent. But Harper was frozen. She wasn't marrying a man she loved. She was marrying a man she barely knew, because her stepmother said so. A gentle knock came at her door. Miss Harper, a maid called softly. It's time to get dressed. Harper didn't respond. She just stared at her reflection and whispered, Who am I marrying today? And why? Meanwhile, in the guest suite across the house, Noah sat alone. He was clean-shaven now, wearing a custom cream-colored suit. His shoes were polished. His hair was styled. But he didn't feel like himself. In fact, he didn't even know who he was anymore. He paced the room, then stopped at the mirror. For a moment, he saw something. A flash of a child's face, a woman smiling behind him, a large white house with sunflowers in the yard. Then it vanished. He looked down at the invitation card on the dresser. Harper Oberson, Noah Reed, to have and to hold. March 21st, 1100 a.m. He clenched his jaw. Was this really happening? Downstairs, Danielle paced the floor in 6-inch designer heels. She wore a tight wine-red dress and a pearl necklace that once belonged to Harper's real mother. Everything was perfect. Her plan was perfect. She smiled as she sipped champagne and nodded at guests arriving in glitzy outfits. To them, this wedding was a strange story, a charity marriage between a socialite and a nobody. But to Danielle, it was revenge. "You wanted to feed the homeless?" she whispered under her breath. "Now you're married to one." Just as she turned to greet a family friend, her eyes landed on Noah's face in a photo displayed on the wedding easel. She froze. His jawline, his eyes, the way his head tilted slightly in the frame. A chill ran down her spine. "It can't be." She grabbed a glass and walked away quickly. Minutes before the ceremony, Harper finally stepped into her gown. It fit perfectly, but her heart felt like it didn't belong in her chest anymore. As the wedding music began to play, she took a deep breath and stepped into the hallway. The makeup artist adjusted her veil. Her father, Robert, stood nearby, avoiding eye contact. "You sure about this?" he asked in a weak voice. She looked at him. "Are you?" she replied coldly. He didn't answer. The garden filled with whispers as Harper walked down the aisle. The cameras clicked. Phones rose. Guests leaned forward. Noah stood at the altar, looking composed but distant. His hands were clenched behind his back. When Harper reached him, she didn't smile. She barely looked at him. The officiant began speaking, his voice clear and cheerful. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." But as the words filled the air, Harper's eyes scanned the crowd. She was looking for something, someone. Then she found him. At the far end of the lawn, near the back gate, stood an old man in a worn suit, Mr. Langston. The man who had slipped her a strange envelope the night before. Their eyes locked. He nodded slowly. Harper took a breath, then turned to Noah. "I need to ask you something," she whispered. His brow furrowed. "Now?" "Yes." She leaned closer. "Who are you, really?" He swallowed hard. "I don't know," he said, "but I keep remembering a name. Hudson." She gasped. Behind them, Danielle's champagne glass slipped and shattered on the stone path. Harper sat in front of the vanity mirror in her room, dressed in her wedding gown. The soft white silk clung gently to her body, but inside she felt frozen. Her makeup was flawless, her hair in an elegant chignon, but her eyes were stormy. She couldn't stop thinking about the man she was about to marry. "He's not just a homeless man. There's something he's not telling me," she whispered to herself. Just then, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "The man you're marrying is not who he says he is. Meet me behind the greenhouse, now." She stood up abruptly, lifted her gown, and hurried downstairs, slipping out the side door while everyone else prepared for the ceremony. Behind the massive greenhouse filled with orchids, an old man in a faded brown coat stood waiting. He had a limp and held a worn envelope in his hand. "Are you Harper?" he asked softly. She nodded cautiously. "I knew Noah when he was a boy," the man said. "But that wasn't his name. He was called Hudson, Hudson Walker." Harper blinked. "What? That can't be. Are you sure?" The man handed her the envelope. Inside was an old photograph. A smiling woman in a garden holding a young boy in her lap. On the woman's chest was a golden rose brooch, the exact one Danielle always wore. That's the brooch," Harper gasped. And that woman, the man said, was Hudson's mother, a kind woman. Her family owned half the city once. Then a fire took everything. Hudson vanished that night. We all thought he died. Tears welled in Harper's eyes. "Why would my stepmother force me to marry him?" she asked. The old man's jaw clenched. "Because if Hudson remembers who he really is, he can take back everything. The wealth, the land, the name. And if your stepmother is who I think she is, then she helped destroy it all." Harper's heart pounded. "He doesn't even know who he is." "Not yet," the man replied. "But it's coming. He's starting to remember. And when he does, Danielle will do anything to silence him." Inside the house, Noah stood alone in a guest room, holding a photograph he had just found in a drawer. It was the same woman, the same brooch. His hands trembled as he traced the outline of the woman's face. Then his fingers reached behind his ear and paused. The small, pale, oval-shaped birthmark. He had always had it. But now he remembered something, faint but real. A voice. A lullaby. "Hudson, Mommy's sunshine," he gasped, staggered backward, his breath catching. Just then a knock at the door. Harper stepped in, breathless. "Noah," she whispered. "Who are you, really?" He stared at her, eyes glassy. "I don't know yet," he said, voice breaking. "But I think I used to be someone, and they took it from me." Harper walked to him slowly and held up the photograph. "This is your mother." "That brooch Danielle wears. It's hers. She stole it." A long silence. "Then Noah," Hudson whispered, "then it's time I take it back." The wedding hall sparkled with golden light and soft music. Dozens of guests filled the seats, dressed in elegant suits and gowns. Everything looked perfect on the surface. But underneath, tension crackled like a hidden fuse. Noah, Hudson, stood at the altar in a crisp, cream-colored tuxedo. His posture was calm, but his mind raced. He had seen the photo. He remembered the name Hudson, and he remembered the fire. He scanned the room. Danielle sat in the front row, smiling like a queen. But Noah noticed something else. Her hands clutched her designer purse too tightly, her eyes twitching every few seconds toward the back door. Harper stood just outside the bridal hallway, dressed in white lace, the golden brooch hidden in her palm. Her breath shook, her fingers trembled, but her eyes burned with resolve. She was marrying a man who the world called a beggar, but she now knew he was a stolen heir. Behind the mansion, hidden behind curtains, the old man, Walter, sat in a private room with a second copy of the photo. On the table beside him was a sealed envelope labeled, "To Hudson, when the time is right." A knock on the door interrupted the silence. A young usher stepped in. "Sir, the bride is about to walk in." Walter nodded. "Tell her, the truth deserves light." Back in the hall, the music shifted. The guests rose. Harper stepped into the aisle, slow and graceful. Phones flashed. Murmurs spread. Danielle's smile flickered. Harper reached the altar, turned to Noah, and whispered, "Do you remember your name?" He nodded slowly. "Hudson, my name is Hudson Walker." The officiant began the vows. "Do you, Noah Carter?" "No," Hudson said firmly, turning to the crowd. "Before I say I do, I need to say something else." Gasps. Cameras clicked. Danielle's eyes widened. "I was once called Hudson Walker," he said. "My parents were killed in a fire when I was a child. I lost everything, my family, my memory, my name. But someone here remembers. Someone here helped burn it all down." Danielle stood up. "This is insane." "He's delusional. He was living on the street." "No," came a voice from the side. Walter stepped forward, holding the envelope. "He's telling the truth. I was his family's driver. I saw what happened the night they died." He handed the envelope to Hudson. Inside, a birth certificate and a second photo. The same woman, the same boy. And this time, the words Hudson Walker, son of Samuel and Grace Walker, written in bold ink. Hudson held up the certificate. "This is my name." "And that woman in the photo? The one Danielle stole this brooch from? She was my mother." Danielle's face went pale. "I tried to erase him once," she hissed. Then, slowly, reached into her clutch. Screams erupted as guests stood. Harper stepped in front of Hudson. But before Danielle could pull out the small silver pistol, Chief Bennett, Harper's father, rushed forward and grabbed her wrist. "Enough!" he roared. "You've done enough damage." The gun dropped. Security stormed in. Danielle was dragged out, screaming. "You think this is over?" she shouted. "You don't know who you're messing with. He was supposed to stay forgotten." Silence fell. Hudson stepped down from the altar, holding Harper's hand. "I wasn't forgotten," he said. "I was waiting." He looked around the hall, then back at her. "Harper, I don't know what happens next, but I know this. You saw me when no one else did." She smiled through tears. "Then let's write the next chapter together." And as the guests applauded and rose to their feet, not for a wedding, but for justice, a new story had begun. It had been 2 weeks since the wedding that wasn't. The press called it the beggar groom reveal. The tabloids printed headlines like, "Homeless man turns out to be billionaire heir." "Socialite stepmother caught in decades-old family scandal." But for Hudson Walker, it wasn't about headlines. It was about truth. Inside the Walker estate, long believed to have been lost, Hudson now stood in his father's old study. Sunlight streamed through the dusty windows. On the desk lay the documents Walter had saved for decades: land deeds, bank accounts, trust funds, and a handwritten letter from Hudson's mother. "If you ever find this, Hudson, then fate has found you again. Remember who you are, and be braver than the fire that tried to erase you." Hudson's fingers trembled. He wasn't a beggar anymore. He wasn't a street ghost. He was the last Walker. Across town, Danielle sat behind bars. No more heels, no makeup, no power, just silence. She refused to talk to anyone. But each night, the same nightmare returned. A burning house, a screaming woman, and a boy she thought was gone forever. As for Harper, she had returned to her childhood home to visit her brother Caleb, still recovering from surgery. Sitting beside his bed, she whispered, "He's not just a survivor, Caleb. He's a warrior, and I think I love him." Caleb smiled. "Good. Because he looks at you like you're the only thing that ever made sense." That evening, at a quiet press conference in downtown Chicago, Hudson stood before a small group of journalists. "My name is Hudson Walker. 10 years ago, I was left to die in a fire. I lost my family. I lost myself. But I didn't lose my dignity." He held up the golden rose brooch. "This belonged to my mother, a woman whose kindness was stolen. I wear it now not for fashion, but for memory." He paused. "To anyone out there who's ever been silenced, forgotten, thrown away, this is your sign. Your name is not your shame. Stand up. Speak out. Take your story back." The crowd erupted in applause. Later that night, back at the mansion, Hudson stood on the rooftop terrace with Harper. The city lights shimmered below. "I still can't believe all of this," Harper said, her head resting on his shoulder. "From street corners to skylines." Hudson smiled. "Maybe that's the real twist, that even broken stories can have beautiful endings." She looked up. "So what now?" He took her hand. "Now we live, honestly, boldly. And maybe we fall in love for real this time." Harper leaned in. "I thought we already had." They kissed under the Chicago night sky, No lies, no secrets, no shame, just truth. Ending call to action for your YouTube video. What did you think of Hudson's journey from forgotten beggar to billionaire heir? Rate this story from 1 to 10 in the comments. If you felt something, like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. There's always more truth waiting to be revealed.